So we're back again, Paul, for our third episode in this podcast series, and we've already spoken about the importance of understanding the current reality of the situation with your business, and also the importance of leadership and people and the owners and the founders realizing where they sit and what their roles are within their business. And today we're going to talk about alignment. So, why is alignment so important in your world, Paul?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. It's critical in your world as well, Dave, but certainly a real starting point for us to have a meaningful conversation around succession and getting the structures and documentation in place is making sure that people are on the same page and that they're starting to have the right conversations, which isn't always the case. Um, the outputs of what we do, as I say, legal structures, the documentation around it. But I always say, and it's not a very lawyer thing to say, it's not about the documents. The real value that I think we bring to the process is getting people in a room, asking the right questions, and starting to facilitate that so that they're talking about the right things, which they may well not have been doing.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting because what I see is that those when those conversations do happen, it's actually quite important to let the rest of the business know what's going to be happening in the future. And particularly where, as we know, the businesses we work with, they've been going for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. They might be into the third or fourth generation. And therefore, there's a lot of people who've also worked and probably grown up with various different reincarnations of the family ownership group. And so, therefore, for them to understand what's going on is, hugely important. And, you know, you can use these business buzzwords like strategy and culture and all of those sorts of things. But ultimately, for me, alignment boils down to the behaviours and the behaviours that the business is showing to each other, within the business, and being able to go into a business and ask anybody who works in that business what that business's top three priorities are, whether it be for today or this week or for the next month, for the next year, and have somebody actually articulate that to me, says to me that that's running through, and the alignment's not just about, as you said, the legal structures and paperwork and things, but actually the business, everybody in the business understands what's going on. And it reminds me a little bit of a story that I'm probably going to completely destroy this story, but I'm going to share it anyway. But I think it's JFK went into NASA just before the Americans, during the process of the Americans putting the moon landing flight together. And he was walking down the corridor in the building, and there was a janitor standing in the corridor cleaning the floor, and the president apparently stopped and asked him what this guy was doing, and the guy said, "I'm putting a man on the moon, Mr. President." And sort of everybody sort of laughed around JFK at the time. But actually, it's quite a valid point. Is that it doesn't matter who it is working in your business. If they don't understand what the organisation or the business is trying to achieve, they don't know what their role is in it, and therefore they can't perform to the best of their ability. I think that alignment piece, from top to bottom, as it were, is crucial.
Yeah, and that's a great story. And in terms of that wider piece in the business and alignment, that is really critical. And you tend to find that a lot of people in the business understand what's going on, and sometimes have an awareness that the actual business owners don't. So having their input and involvement in the process is absolutely vital. But it also can only move forward if there's proper alignment within the ownership group, the key owners and stakeholders, the leadership, because if they aren't thinking about discussing these issues, if there isn't alignment there, they're going to struggle to get alignment within the business generally.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, that manifests itself on the commercial side of the business as well, where people aren't necessarily aware of where those key touch points or pinch points might be appearing. And when I worked in hospitality, we used to talk a lot about the last 3 feet, and it's the fact it's the people in the hotel, pub, restaurants who are the ones who are producing that amazing, exceptional guest experience for people. So actually, they're the ones who know acutely what challenges they face in order to deliver that great experience. So if we weren't listening to those guys in the same way other businesses don't listen to the people who are, for want of a better phrase, doing the doing, to help formulate that alignment on what the business needs to look like going forward, or where the challenges are, or where they want to focus, their attention in terms of developing the business. You just lose sight of some really really key insight from some really important people within your business.
Yeah, the issue is sometimes how those conversations start, what prompts them, and trying to get to those conversations before problems have set in. For us, the conversations are often prompted by that review of where you are now and talking about some of those default legal rules, which people find surprising. When you explain where they are now legally, it often isn't what they want, or what they would have expected to be the case. So we've got them in the room, if you like, and we can then start to talk about it and move things forward in a constructive way that works for them. But as I say, involving the other key stakeholders, and opening up conversations that perhaps have been just a bit hidden.
And I think there's a lot of, in line with a lot of the things that we've talked about already, it all boils down to asking the right questions at the right time of the right people. And I think for me, it's that bit around business owners quite often end up seeing themselves needing to have the answers to every question. And again, we touched on this in the last episode around, well, actually, focus your efforts on where your skill set is, and bring people on the journey so they're again aligned with what you're trying to achieve, but also making the most of their skill set and empowering them to do something differently. Because quite often, if you share where you want the business to go to, people will put their hands up and say, "Oh, actually, I'll be quite interested in turning my hand to marketing," and you'd never even thought about asking that individual to do marketing, or it might be finance, or it might be operations. It doesn't matter. The principle will be there'll be people there who have got skills you might even not know about, that you're not utilising in your business fully, to help you deliver what you want to get to. And I think that for me is about that alignment point is really key.
Yeah, I think it's the ownership opening themselves up to ideas, and we can help with facilitating that they're considering the right things, asking the right questions. So when we're sitting with business owners, we pose a number of what if questions. What would you want to happen to your shares on death? What if someone wants to leave the business? Who decides about the sale of the business? And again, this is getting them into a place where they're lifting their heads up a little and thinking about themselves as a business owner rather than only the business, and gets them into a place where they can at least move the discussion on. And what we do generally find is that a consensus can be reached, but if we haven't had the conversations and these issues or life events occur, it can become more problematic.
Yeah, and I totally concur with that point, because I think again it boils down to the sooner you start having those conversations, albeit about some very unusual or difficult subject matters to talk about. You don't particularly want to be talking about what happens if somebody leaves the business, or sadly passes away, or things like that. But the reality is that those are the conversations you need to be having. Is, I think, all that then brings back to the, well, also what's then the commercial impact on the business. And so for things like, particularly around exit strategies, I see this quite a lot, is that business owners and leadership teams don't think about the fact that they are in the business, running the business. So therefore, any potential buyers come along and look at that and go, well, actually, if you leave, you are the business, you're running the business. I need to replace you with a £100,000 a year salary, and all of a sudden the commerciality around any potential deal is suddenly softened because of those things. But again, if everybody's aligned with what they want to do, and if exit is the option, then actually they can work towards making sure that is as profitable and financially viable for everybody concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good example of the fact that it's never too early to plan. So a sale exit is not the only way that you're going to be dealing with succession. But if you are, then the earlier you plan, the more options are going to be available to you. We see people come to us a little too late in the process, and there are planning opportunities that have been missed. Always, there's not a bad time to start planning, and if there's flexibility in the plan that's kept under review, that's even better.
Yeah, and I think that's, like you said, that crucial point about thinking about it as soon as you possibly can, which is a little bit counterintuitive given some of the situations we've already spoken about that they might be discussing, is crucial to this. So it avoids people, I've heard stories shared to me where there's people who are still working in their businesses at 75, 80, 85 years of age because they've not really thought about what's going to happen next, and they're sort of stuck in it. And they're almost falling out of love with the business that they started 40 years ago or 50 years ago, that was a pure, passion project for them, and it's treated them incredibly well, and that's what we don't want for people, is people getting to a point where they feel like there's only one option, and that might be exit, but actually there's 4 or 5 different options that they could have considered if they'd have come to either of us, sooner than they do potentially.
Yeah, and in some of those situations, as you say, you've got ready-made solutions within the business, other people there to take it on. Maybe it's the next generation, but unless that's been addressed and talked about properly, you're not going to make the progress that you could.
And I think for me, it's going back for people being able to find out where they're at with all of these things we've spoken about. So it's probably a good time to talk about our Clarity Framework assessment again. There'll be a link in the notes to this podcast. 5 minutes, 21 questions. It really gives you a flavour for where you're at with your business currently, with all of the things that Paul and I have already spoken about, and gives you the opportunity then to follow it up if you feel that you need to with either of us to talk about your business in more detail.